Hi everyone, it's 1 or 2 minutes past two, so I suggest we get going. I'm sure everyone's busy. So a huge welcome to today's webinar, How to Ace Annual PR Reporting. So this is really made with love from our team here for all you PR pros who are struggling with the challenge of showcasing and proving the impact of a whole year's work, all whilst wearing incredibly itchy, festive jumpers. You are all heroes. So, my name is Richard. I'm the co founder and CEO of Released. And I'd like to really thank you for joining, whether you're watching this live or on demand, as we will be sharing a recording of this after the session. So, I'm sure everyone's busy. So, let's get going. Right. So, in this webinar, we are going to cover the following. We're going to take this opportunity away from all of the intense work that we're all doing to take a step back and think about reframing annual reporting. We're going to cover some actionable tips that you can take away with you directly after the session. We're actually going to share a template that you can use for inspiration. So do stick around till the end. And if you've got any questions at all, do jot them down. There is a Q&A section in the Zoom panel. I believe it's under the More menu. So jot your questions down and time permitting, we'll get to those at the end and we'll have this wrapped up within about 20 minutes. So let's get started. So first question is, what gives us the right to provide best practice and advice on annual PR reporting? Well, amazingly, we've been running Release now for over 10 years. And before that, we worked in PR ourselves. And in the time since founding Released, we've actually seen over 250,000 reports go out from teams from over 80 countries. But most importantly, we've had the opportunity to have hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations with often quite stressed PR pros at this time of year. And we've been privy to lots of feedback from stakeholders, whether that's clients, executives, who've actually seen annual PR reports. And we'll touch on that a bit later. First thing we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of a think about what annual reporting actually is. And the first question is, what is the real purpose of annual reporting? And I think the temptation is to think, right, really, really busy. We have to now show our whole year's worth of coverage. The issue with that is, as I'm sure you're all dealing with now, just the sheer workload of doing that and the drain of resource makes that quite a challenging experience and actually isn't great for recipients either. So what we recommend doing is just reframing it slightly and thinking, now hold on a minute, if we play our cards right, this is actually an opportunity for us to put forward a business case to our client or our internal executives for further investment in PR. And that's the case whether you're a freelancer, an agency, or an in-house team. So that breeds the question, really. Well, if we're trying to put forward a business case, who are we actually trying to reach with this thing? And often, business as usual reporting involves sharing a report, often monthly, with if you're an agency, direct client contact, or if you're in-house, a few trusted execs who are usually quite familiar with what you're doing. But actually, again, if things go right, we want these reports to be seen by as many people as possible. But what does that mean in practice? Well, a lot of those people are actually going to be very, very busy and potentially juggling different reports from different teams. And of course, the more people we reach, the higher the likelihood that those people won't actually be that familiar with PR as well, which is a common challenge. So if that's the case, if we are reaching a wider audience, what is the best approach to annual reporting? Is it actually to fire hose people with all of the brilliant coverage we've achieved over the year? Or in fact, would it be smarter for all parties to really have a laser focus on what do we actually try and achieve this year and how do we best provide evidence that we've done that? What's the most concise, time efficient way of doing that? And that's what we're going to have a look at in this webinar. So now, we're lucky enough to be working with lots of different companies for many years, and one such company has kindly allowed us to share how they approach their annual reporting. So what we're going to do now is have a look at how they do it, try and take some takeaways in terms of best practice and hopefully some inspiration. So they are actually a manufacturer of bricks, high durability, sustainably produced bricks, to be specific, for use in large scale construction projects. So let's have a look at how they do it. So the first thing they do is they rewind to the beginning of the year and they say, what did we actually set out to achieve this year before all of the noise took over? And they usually distill it down to between one, maybe two, three, four key objectives, either that have been instructed by the business or that they've actually put upon themselves. And then what they do is they follow a common theme. What was the approach? What stuff did we do? What were our key objectives, sorry, key achievements, and what did we learn from it? But it all hangs off of this linchpin of what was the initial thing that we set out to do. Let's have a look at this in more detail. So in this case, the business objective at the beginning of 2025, one of them was, look, we need to raise awareness of our key business pillars, which were durability, sustainability, and affordability. The next thing they do is they just provide a refresher on the actual approach they took. In this case, awards that provide trusted third-party endorsement and can be amplified by media coverage. Now, the key here is what they do is they assume no knowledge from the reader. So they try and articulate things in a simple and clear way as possible. The next thing they do is they talk about the things that they did, the activities that supported the business objective. So in this case, they did all of the things we would expect. They identified high profile relevant industry awards. They prepared submissions, but they aligned them to those key pillars. They provided media training for the people who might be up on stage or be involved in media coverage, which is what they did next. They leveraged wins and shortlists to secure coverage. And then they amplified it across priority social channels, which in their case were LinkedIn and X. What are we really doing here? We're educating the reader on the skill set and expertise of a modern PR function, which is a great opportunity, which can be easily lost. The next thing they do, which is quite interesting, is they actually tailor the coverage and the analytics to that particular aim, the business objective. So obviously they showcase the coverage, but they select metrics and analytics that back up the achievements. So in this case, they focused on things like brand recall score, which is about how memorable the brand is, mentions, which is about visibility, attention cost estimate, which gives a commercial figure to how much it would cost to gather the same amount of attention as earned media. And they really focused on things like brand perception analysis and key messaging. Now, we're going to talk about these more advanced analytics in a moment. I'm going to show you some examples of how they work, but you can see they relate closely to what they were trying to achieve. And then key learnings, examples of which we can share here. They identified which outlets achieved the widest reach and were of highest value. They leveraged their staff social accounts to amplify wins. They recommend exploiting partner networks for greater exposure next year. What they're really doing here is they're pitching for future work, which is, again, a key opportunity for these annual reports that can get easily lost. So let's take a step back here. What have we actually done? We have refreshed readers on the year's business objectives, which they, and indeed all of us, may have forgotten. They've educated the readers on the expertise of a modern PR function. Maybe another team will find that useful. Maybe it will educate some stakeholders. They've used coverage as evidence of success rather than the ultimate focus of the report, which is a kind of big mindset shift. And we'll talk about tips about how to do that later. They've tailored the analysis just slightly to the relevant objective, just to give them as much evidence as they can of success. And they've structured the report in a clear, logical, and easily repeatable way. And in doing this, they've helped prove that PR has really helped the business achieve its goals, which is really important given the extended audience. Talking of which, let's reflect back on something we mentioned earlier about how do people react to these different styles of reports. So I've had an associate for a number of years now who is the chief of staff for a big asset management company. And this is his verbatim quote about the PR report that his PR team sent him, and they used the more fire hose coverage approach. He said, I was sent a doc with about 250 slides full of websites, and I didn't know what the F I was looking at. Now, contrast that with the CEO of a client. Now, this email was shared with us through one of our clients who said, wanted to say a big thanks for the great work you and the team have done. PR has played an instrumental role in our growth and securing investment this year. Now, that's the kind of reaction I'm sure we all want. And that's just made a bit more likely by, again, just upweighting the business objectives and using coverage to evidence that. So there's a lot of theory there. Let's talk about some actionable tips that you can take away with you after this session and hopefully put into practice. And we've got 5 here based on our learnings over the last 10 years. The first is a really simple one, a quick win. Having worked in PR myself, I know the temptation is just grab a template, grab a presentation, cobble something together, send it over to the client. But if you can, just take a step back again, put together a structure that you think works and will be effective, maybe some bullet points, ping it over to them. If you're an agency, that will be your client. If it's a client, that might be some of your key execs, and say, would this work for you? You'll then have a much higher chance that the report will be successful, and it's super easy to do. Secondly, and this is a big one, something we get asked about all the time, how do you avoid a huge amount of workload and massive reports that don't get read? Well, one of the key issues is this need to include every single piece of coverage, and completely understand that need because you want to show volume. One approach to tackling this is to include the highlight coverage in your report, maybe a handful, doesn't matter how many, a dozen, however many you feel is appropriate for each objective, to make sure that stakeholders can really see your best coverage and it isn't drowned out in 100 other pieces. And then use key metrics like total coverage volume to show, okay, yes, there are only 20 pieces of coverage here, but actually we achieved lots and lots more. And that's a really good way of doing it, and it will save a lot of time. Next, I want to talk about advanced analytics. Things are moving very quickly in measurement. And whilst reach and coverage views figures may have worked last year, there's a lot more that you can do this year to prove the impact of your work. And to showcase this, I'm going to actually look at a report that was created earlier and show you some of the more advanced analytics that are now accessible either through a platform like Released, or you can often get this through things like ChatGPT if you can get the prompts correct, and we can help with that. But let's look at some of these. So in terms of raising brand awareness, we talked about mentions before. Obviously, if you're benchmarking mentions over time and they're going up, you're showing that you are increasing brand visibility. And then we have a metric called prominence. So this shows whether you're, broadly speaking, appearing in the headline of coverage, the top, the middle of the bottom, or the bottom. This is very powerful in annual reporting if you can show over the course of the year you predominantly appear in the headline or the top of coverage. And some of our most popular metrics are these new attention metrics, which can show how many hours of focused attention you achieved for your coverage over the year. And also attention cost estimate, which replaces AVE, give you a really, really powerful commercial figure to say, look, if you were to ask the digital ad team to purchase this amount of attention, you would need to spend this amount on ads. The beauty of PR is that earned media costs 0. But what else can we do? Well, if we think about key messages and those pillars, what is the business trying to communicate? What we can now do is automated key message analysis, so you can showcase and prove that you've communicated successfully with your audiences. And then finally, AI-powered sentiment analysis. Rather than analyzing the sentiment of an article, which may be negative, for example, it's able to zoom in on the sentiment of your brand, so you can do much more robust and credible sentiment analysis, as well as perception analysis, which is like having an on-demand survey or focus group, again, AI-powered, that says, look, based on the coverage in this report, here's how the average reader would perceive your brand. It's very powerful. It's like a market positioning analysis. And then finally, We can talk about things like, okay, over the course of the year, how memorable have we made the brand? And things like brand recall score give you an idea of that. So the concept here is that you can benchmark this over time and you can benchmark it year on year to show that you're making meaningful progress. The next tip, we usually recommend sharing one format of report, but because we want this to reach more stakeholders, this is a good opportunity actually to think about, okay, how can we use email? How can we use PDFs? How can we use online reports? So I'd think about leveraging email for quick bullet point highlights of the year, a nice dynamic online report if you have access to a platform that does that for kind of very easily shareable format, and then a PDF for your more traditional stakeholders. And then finally, this is the most helpful and least helpful tip, start in January. Now, obviously, January 2025 is long gone, but what's going to hopefully happen now is you'll share your reports and then you'll get feedback. And based on that feedback, what we recommend doing is organizing things from day one in January. So that's a folder structure or hierarchy, get it all nice and neat. But luckily, if you are a released user, you have the feature to actually create annual reports by pulling in coverage throughout the year in a couple of clicks. We hope those actionable tips were useful. A couple of final points. So first of all, what we wanted to do is create a layout, an example layout that shows how actually this is actually quite practical to do, to put these tips in place. So after this webinar, we're going to share the example I'm about to show you. We're also going to put this in a templates gallery if you are an existing released user, so you can actually use this template. And here it is. So based on the principle we've just covered, here at the top of the report, what we've got here is just a pure layout, by the way, no content. We've got an overview, an executive summary, which goes through, okay, what were all of the objectives we focused on? What were some of the year's highlights and key wins across all of those objectives? What have we learned? What are the opportunities for next year? Overarching metrics and analytics for the whole year. But then a section for each objective. So here we've got a summary of exactly the process we talked about. What was the objective? What was our approach? Key activities, highlights, and key learnings. We recommend using bullet points. They're a lot more digestible, as well as the key coverage highlights, for example, online, social, print, broadcast, whatever you've got. And then objective specific metrics, which can be easily tweaked to suit that particular aim. Another section below. And then just to finish things off, who was this report created by, just to do a bit of merchandising for your agency or for your in-house team. Again, we'll share a link to this afterwards and we'll embed this in the templates gallery of your released account if you are a client. And finally, we've got some time for Q&A. So before this session, actually yesterday we were on a call and one of our clients asked a really good question, which I'd like to share, which is, okay, they said this year we actually secured less coverage than we did last year. What do we do about that? That's a really good question. Obviously, in an ideal world, you'd have more coverage. No one's arguing with that. But by taking this approach where you're actually thinking of it more as a business case, which is focused on what are the key things we've done, and where coverage is simply used as evidence, actually you just switch the framing slightly. So the volume of coverage matters less and the quality of coverage matters a bit more. What I'm going to do now is just have a look in the Q&A section. So Jazz has asked, is there a template for all of the sentiment and evaluation? So all of those charts and graphs are super easy to add to a report. They all live in the evaluation section. Georgie has asked about the attention metrics. So attention is a huge area of measurement. There's loads of opportunities here. And we've done a separate webinar on attention metrics. And actually we've created a really robust client or exec facing article. So we will actually share that after the webinar so you can read in detail. How are they calculated? How is attention cost estimate different from AVE? Key message analysis. The way it works is that in our case, you would type in your key message, which is a simple, clear key message. Now we know, you guys know, and the system knows that a key message is not going to appear verbatim in coverage. No journalist is going to reprint a key message. So what AI is very, very good at as a language model is understanding the essence of the key message and going and hunting for evidence of that across your coverage. So look, I hope that was useful. Thank you so much for your questions. If there are any more questions, do email us. Next step is that we are going to email a recording of this around. We're going to email a link to that template. But I'd just like to say a huge thank you for joining. Thank you for taking a break from what is, I'm sure, a very stressful time. I hope you've taken something out of this webinar. And if you have any questions about streamlining your reporting process, using the analytics we've touched on here, or anything else, please do let us know. Have a great festive period from all of us at Released. Bye-bye.